its global philanthropy and citizenship programs. Prior to this experience, Tim worked as a lawyer specializing in not-for-profit corporate law. He serves on the boards of Americans for the Arts, Mark Morris Dance Group, and Second Stage Theater. Tim is a professor at New York University, where he teaches graduate courses in arts management, and he is the lead faculty member for the Institute for Corporate Social Responsibility at Johns Hopkins University. He writes a bi-weekly blog on corporate social responsibility, which you can all find at www.americanexpress.com/CSR now. And Tim is also a contributor to Forbes, where he writes about the intersection of grassroots movements and philanthropy. Tim, welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that introduction, Shushanna. Great to see you, and great to see everyone. And Scott, thank you for those kind words as well. I have to say that I was on another call with Scott yesterday, and he said that you guys had the best speaker ever yesterday. So I know the bar has been set really high.
Thank you, Tim. Just a moment for a pause and reflection, because for the past few months, this is something that I've been doing, and I am not sure whether or not you have had the chance to pause and reflect, because I know that you work so hard and even doing your best to make sure that everything goes smooth. So I want to give this time, the special opportunity for you to pause for a moment and think about your emotions. And I would like to start off with a question of how would you describe your emotions in color right now, and why?
Yeah, thank you. I told Abby yesterday that your questions are like the hardest questions ever. You know, I would say that in March, April, and May of this year, I would have described my emotions as red. You know, I saw danger everywhere. I think most people did. I was home, pretty much quarantined at my home in New York City, really pretty much afraid to go outside. Very, very seldom went out at all. I could see people in the park right across the street from my apartment. Lots of people were out jogging and walking their dogs and bike riding, but that just didn't feel safe for me. And this was, you know, before the government encouraged people to wear masks. So, you know, I just saw danger everywhere, and I think we were seeing it at work. You know, American Express took all of our 65,000 employees and we moved them home. You know, around the world, and really started, you know, paying super attention to the health and safety of our colleagues. So I was definitely in a red mood, you know, for a few months. At the end of May, I moved my family up to Sharon, Connecticut, which is a very rural part of the country. We're now staying in a farmhouse that is surrounded by trees, and the Audubon Center, which is a bird sanctuary. And so for a few days, I would have described my emotions as green. Like everything around here was green. We were outside for the first time really in months. It's beautiful here. It's very quiet, pristine, very, very rural. And we just don't see very many people, although we do literally in our backyard have a bird rehabilitation center where there are birds of prey that are being rehabilitated. So there's a bald eagle and a hawk and a falcon and owls and all kinds of these birds back there that people can come and visit. And so they do. So we do see people doing that. But, you know, for a few days, I was really in a green mood. But I have to say for the last 2 weeks, I've been in a black mood. And, you know, that black is really reflective of what's happening in our country and in countries around the world. And, you know, I'm both in mourning, you know, Black is the color of mourning, but also in solidarity with the people who are out in the streets protesting and that are working for change. And so I'm feeling Black these days as far as an emotional state.
Great, team. This is wonderful. I keep smiling, and I like the transition of the colors and the palette of having the red and green and black. And I would encourage everyone, even the fellows now on the call and the community who is watching us on Facebook, to just take a few moments and reflect on this, because I think it's a powerful tool, especially nowadays. Thank you for that, team. My next question, of course, is going to be about your experience as somebody being involved in CSR, corporate social responsibility. And I wonder, how would you stress the importance of CSR, especially these days? I wanted to say chaos, but I would say crisis, because it sounds more of a challenging and a solution-oriented question. And if you can give certain examples that American Express has been doing to respond to the coronavirus outbreaks, and if you are also welcome to share other examples from other big corporations.
Sure. Well, back in March, March 13th was my last day in the office, and that was really sort of in the height of when the virus was impacting New York City and starting to impact the rest of this country, but it had obviously impacted other countries before here. But we started to be responsive, first of all, to our colleagues, to our employees at American Express. As I mentioned, I think we right away seized the moment and moved everybody home. We had 65,000 people working in offices around the world, and we moved everyone home. A lot of them didn't have laptops or the right equipment, and so a lot of that happened very immediately, so that we could continue to operate as a company, but do it in a safe and effective way. So I think that a large part of corporate social responsibility is how you treat your own employees and what you do, for them and with them. And in this particular health crisis, health and safety was of primary concern. But we also wanted to do something for our communities and our customers as well. And we kind of approached the pandemic the same way that we would approach a natural disaster like a hurricane or a tornado or flood, in that there are kind of three stages of support after a disaster or crisis. The first is relief. What are you going to do to help with basic needs? And after a hurricane or a tornado, one of those basic needs could be shelter. And so we typically, do respond with the American Red Cross or other organizations to help provide shelter for people. But that wasn't the case here. I mean, shelter was not the issue, but a big issue was food security, and ensuring that people had access to food, and also just helping healthcare, our frontline healthcare workers, in healthcare organizations around the world. So we really seized on those two aspects, healthcare and food, and started making grants immediately to organizations that were aiding vulnerable communities around the world who were impacted. And we made about 50 grants in the course of just a couple of weeks, really, to assist those kinds of organizations, and whether they were organizations like Feeding America, which is a coalition of food banks, or the Greater New York Hospital Association, which supported the purchase of masks and other equipment for healthcare workers, or the Australian Red Cross, which was working with victims of COVID in Australia, to a variety of organizations in Europe and around the world. But we did that pretty immediately. at the same time that we were trying to take care of our employees. We then sort of moved, once we did that, which, you know, took a couple of weeks or to a month, 2 or 3 weeks to do all of that. There's a lot of work involved, as you know, Shushanna, in making grants. It's not an easy thing. You have to, you know, locate the right organizations and, you know, do all the compliance work and actually get the money out the door, which turned out to be a huge issue because nobody was in their offices to receive checks. And so we weren't in our offices to send checks. And so it became sort of a big issue to get money out the door. But we then eventually returned to what I would call the recovery stage, which is, you know, within the next phase, which is, okay, you've sort of dealt with immediate concerns, you know, but then what are you going to do to help communities recover? And in that regard, we really turned to our longstanding nonprofit partners and tried to shift our support from project-oriented support to general operating support for these organizations so that they could continue to survive and exist and thrive as organizations. And a lot of the projects that we would typically have supported were abandoned during that time because they just couldn't happen. You know, you can't do a face-to-face leadership academy program, for instance. And so we either shifted our support to virtual programs if they were appropriate, or to general operating support for organizations, and really focused on those long-standing partners like Atlas Corps, where we've made a significant investment over time. We know the players, we're really partners in many, many ways. And really, instead of supporting new organizations, and by the way, I was on the receiving end of literally thousands of requests from nonprofit organizations all over the world for emergency funds. We just, you know, couldn't do that and decided not to do that and really try to focus on those organizations where we had, you know, longstanding relationships, you know, and we're in the process of doing that. So we're still working on that, working through, you know, several hundred grants that we are making to our longstanding nonprofit partners. But then, you know, we need to move into the third stage, which is the, you know, rebuilding and what happens, what can we do to help rebuild these organizations, rebuild communities, rebuild lives that need rebuilding. And that phase has yet to come. And, you know, we're working on strategies around that phase. But of course, in the meantime, there was another crisis that developed, you know, related to, you know, the murder of George Floyd in Minneapolis. And certainly this was not a one-time occurrence. This has happened, you know, repeatedly over hundreds of years, where African-American citizens and Blacks have been, you know, victims of discrimination and violence. But it really, you know, that murder, I think, brought those issues to the forefront. And so we had a second crisis on our hands, or a second opportunity to be responsive. And so we approached that in the same way, right? So we made a couple of grants immediately to organizations, again, where we have longstanding relationships, the NAACP Legal and Educational Fund, Legal Defense and Educational Fund, and the National Urban League here in the United States. And we are in the process of identifying some similar opportunities and organizations in other parts of the world that we could support from a social justice standpoint. So we did that sort of immediately out the gate because we wanted to make a statement. And in fact, our CEO made a very public statement, both to our colleagues and to the public and our customers, about our values and our beliefs, you know, related to equity and diversity and inclusion. But now we're, you know, kind of in the recovery stage already, and we've been talking to organizations, and this was the call that Scott and Abby were on yesterday, where we're taking a look at some of our programs, like our Leadership Academy programs that we do around the world. And you know, I think it's a good time to double down on our support of in the development of diverse leaders in the nonprofit sector around the world. We've been doing that for 12 years, but I think we need to really put a stake in the ground and say that we're going to really double down on that and do it much more deliberately and intentionally than we have in the past. And I'm sorry, there's someone at my door. And I don't know where my wife is, so just give me 1 second, okay?
Yeah, sure.
That's fine. We all know that there's a decent chance that my kid's going to run it at some point here too.
We welcome guests. We welcome kids. We welcome guests to us. And meanwhile, I would remind fellows who are with us today. Feel free to write down your questions in the chat box, and we will come to the questions once we are done with the main questions. So,
okay.
Welcome back, team.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That was the father of the owner of the house that we're renting here. So I was talking about, I think it's important for us to really put a stake in the ground and say that we're going to really ramp up our support in developing diverse leaders around the world, but also social justice organizations. I mean, I think that while we have certainly supported the leaders of some social justice organizations, that hasn't been a high priority for us. And I think that we can take some of our leadership programs and really refocus them on developing leaders in that at the social justice and equity space. So I think we're just right in the process of figuring that out. And we'll then sort of shift to rebuilding phase there as well. But I think that, if I've been the last couple of days, I've been on several calls with my colleagues in other companies around the world. And I think that other CSR programs have taken a similar approach and are taking a similar approach. There are some immediate things that companies can do, but then there are more, long-term things that companies need to do. And of course, it's not just about corporate social responsibility is not just about what you give, it's about what you do as a company, how you act as a company. And I think that even though I'm proud of what we've done at American Express over the years, we have a long way to go, as does everyone else. We recognize that, and we're committed to moving forward. So I think that CSR has a role to play. I think companies have a role to play. Companies have a lot of resources and a lot of people, and I think that they can make a real impact. But ultimately, it also depends on leaders like all of you in the nonprofit sector and in other sectors. And we're happy to be involved with the development of leaders. We're happy to help organizations in projects move forward, and certainly happy to be involved with all of you in one way or the other.
Oh, thank you, team. This is super powerful, and I really like the how you took us through the stages. And I think it can be definitely going and relating to our own personal lives of how we make sure that we are going through the stages to stay resilient during these times. And you said a very nice sentence that I want to stick to it. You said the organizations need to know how to act, right? And you also mentioned about the leaders that are super important, especially during these times. And I want to stick to that idea and ask you about your advice that you would give to us, LSCORE fellows, the social leaders. What actions we should be taking at the moment? We always say that we are the future. I think that we are the present, and the actions that we are taking now are going to be super important in future. So what are the 5 actions that we need to take at the moment?
Well, I'm not sure I'm going to give you 5, but I'm going to give you 3, just to be radical. So the first, I think, is you all are in a unique position to really double down on your own causes and your own organizations. This is the time to do that. It's the time to get better at what you do. Everyone can stand to be better and do better. We all, I think, need to do that. And, I would really encourage you and challenge you to think about your own professional lives, your own organizations, your own causes, and commit to doing better. And that can take many forms. It can mean working harder. It can mean taking classes. It can mean reaching out to your network and colleagues to learn from them. But I think that we all need to take a pledge to do better in our lives and in our communities. And I think as young people, you're in a unique position to do that. And I would really encourage you to take the time and do that. Having said that, I think the second piece of advice is that it's also a good time to explore other causes and other opportunities. So I'm a big believer in being interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary or multifaceted. And I think that that's easier to do when you're young. So at the same time that you're developing your own expertise and your own, causes and your own organizations, I would encourage you to reach out and learn about other causes and other kinds of organizations and other kinds of approaches, and really sort of expand your palette. I mean, this is something I encourage my students to do at NYU. They come into this arts management program that I'm a faculty member in, and they think they're only interested in theater, or they're only interested in dance or the visual arts or whatever. And I really encourage them to get out of that box and to think about other disciplines and other causes that they could get interested in and develop some expertise in. Because it makes you a more well-rounded citizen, it makes you a more well-rounded professional, and quite honestly, it makes you more marketable as well. So as you develop your own careers, having more than one area of expertise or interest can be extremely valuable. And as Shushanna was reading off my my bio, you could see I've bounced around. I've worked in the nonprofit sector. I've worked in the for-profit sector. I've been a lawyer. I've taught. So I've done that very much on purpose in my career, and haven't just done one thing. I've done lots of different things, and that's kept me fresh, and it's kept me challenged, and it made me more well-rounded. And quite honestly, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in now, heading corporate social responsibility at a Fortune 500 company, if I didn't have a variety of experiences, if I hadn't worked in the nonprofit sector, if I hadn't been a lawyer, if I hadn't worked in the for-profit sector at another big company. Those were all experiences that made me qualified and attractive for the position that I'm in. So definitely encourage you to round out, that career and areas of interest. And then the third thing I would encourage you to do is just to be flexible and be adaptable. These are Bob Dylan, a long time ago, wrote about the times they are a-changing, and hey, the times are a-changing like every couple of weeks. Now it's not, it's an ever-changing world and ever-changing environment, and you can't afford to get stuck in one place or with one point of view. I think you have to be flexible and adaptable to change. And again, that's really critical when you're young. I think it's critical at all stages, but it gets harder to do, right? So when you get older and you've got more financial responsibilities and kids and a mortgage and whatever else, we older folks have, and responsibilities, it gets, a change gets more difficult, and adaptability gets more difficult. But I can tell you that the people who are, I'm a baby boomer, and people that are baby boomers who are still working and that are challenged and still contributing are those who have been adaptable, that have been, not stuck in the old ways of doing things, but really pushing to make change, and constantly changing themselves. So I think that's, my third area of advice is to be flexible, be adaptable. And if you wrap all those three areas of advice up into one little mantra, which I use, I know with my staff, and Shushanna's probably heard this, is you've got to be focused and flexible, right? You've got to be, I think, to survive and to thrive in this world, you've got to be focused on, an expertise, on a discipline, on a cause, but you've got to be flexible too. You've got to be adaptable to change, and willing to change. So those are my areas of advice. I know it's not five things, but for me, they're the three most important things that you can do as young leaders. And I think if you do, you'll have really terrific careers ahead of you, and really be successful, but also very impactful in your communities and your organizations.
Thank you so much, Tim. And for our fellows, as I mentioned when I was reading out your biography, Tim is a contributor at Forbes. So for the next two two action items, maybe they can find in reading ongoing articles that you post there. I personally love them, and I get so many tips and so much of great content. So I would definitely encourage our fellows and the community who is watching us to make sure to check those out too. And really thankful for those tips and advice. I personally am going to follow, and I personally found flexibility and adaptability super important, especially during these times. And being mindful of time, and I know that we have questions coming from the alumni. I want to have a curious moment here, because I'm curious, and I have prepared some fun questions in a blitz format that we will do very quickly, so we have time for questions too. And the first question is, what book or music empowers you and why?
Yeah. Impossible for me to choose just one, but I will say that I'm really a big fan of anything that's contemporary. So contemporary fiction, I read a lot of contemporary fiction, listen to contemporary music, watch new movies, interested in new theater, new dance. So I'm not a big fan of classical anything or classic anything. So I'm really always interested in what's new and who the new writers and artists and innovators are. So that's what empowers me. What empowers me are new things. I'm really not really interested in old things. So that's really what turns me on.
That's great. So here is a new question for you to get inspired and empowered. What do you think you are missing out in most right now, and why?
Yeah, well, I'm missing out on live events. I'm a real spectator, and so I love going to theater and love dance and music, concerts, and really love going to live events, and I'm missing those. I mean, Netflix is terrific. Love Netflix. And, Zoom is great, but it's not the same thing as being live. So that's really what I'm missing is attending live performances and live events.
Yeah, supporting that. And my last question before I get questions from fellows, I wonder, what are you most looking forward to in the next month? and why?
Yeah, well, I mean, we're very, very lucky to have rented this farmhouse for the summer. We have it until Labor Day, and like I said, brought my family up here. It's very, quiet and peaceful, and I'm just looking forward to being outdoors. I love being outdoors, and we have a patio here in a backyard, and there are hiking trails in the Audubon Center, and we can go biking around here. And so, unlike being in the city where I was afraid to go outdoors and was not looking forward to a summer of wearing masks when I went outdoors, here, you don't have to do that, right? Unless you're with people, and there are very few people around here. So I'm just really looking forward to being outdoors, even if it's as simple as, having lunch out on the patio for a half an hour in the middle of the day.
Yes.
Or cocktails at the end of the day, I should say.
That's super important. And I like to say, have the little celebrations, even if they are little, even if it's just enjoying the nature and going for a short walk. So definitely nature is calling. So take the advantage of that and celebrate the little moments and enjoy your time. And thank you for sharing this and for your reflections. And want to give time also to our fellows. And I'm going to read the question coming from Mariam. Are there systems in place to make sure grantees represent diverse backgrounds and cultures, mechanisms to ensure that grant making isn't biased towards certain groups of people? And if so, what are those mechanisms?
Yeah, well, I think that, the first thing is you've got to have a diverse staff, right? So you've got to have diverse voices on your team. And I think we have that on my team at American Express, and certainly have it throughout the company as well. And so, I can listen, and I can reflect, and I can, talk to people and have my own ideas, but it's just not the same as having a diverse group of people around me. So that's the first, order of business, I think, is you've got to ensure that you've got a diverse group of people, and then they will, ensure that those things happen. I mean, I can tell you that Richard Brown, talks about diversity every day and challenges me on things every day. And sometimes I challenge him on things as well, but it's, it's having that diverse team so that you have people who have different kinds of relationships, different points of view, who can ensure that the kinds of organizations and the kinds of projects and people that we're supporting, reflect the diversity of our communities and of the world. So we don't have any, what I would say, quotas or quantitative measures of that. I mean, we do know who it is that we're supporting, and we know the kinds of constituents that they're supporting, because we have, we've developed long-term relationships with organizations. But again, I'm always encouraging the team not to get stuck in supporting the same organizations year over year. So, we also want to ensure that there's some churn in the organizations that we support. So it's great that we've, been partners of Atlas Corps for the last 10 years, and they're terrific, and Scott and Abby are terrific. And we love supporting these projects, but we don't want to support the same organizations, for 10 years. That would be, boring and restrictive. So, you want to have a core group of organizations that you're supporting over a long term, because that's how you can really have impact. But you also want to, be sure that you've got new organizations and new voices that are being supported. So it sort of goes back to my this mantra that I keep, in my head all the time about being focused and flexible. You want to be focused on, a core group of partners and institutions, but you also want to be flexible enough to add new institutions and new voices into the mix.
That's great, team. Thank you so much. We have more questions coming in. So I'm going to ask the following question. Earlier in your speech, you had a comment about business doing things better and not just supporting causes. So what are some factors that bring these discussions into the boardroom?
Well, I think that, I mean, there's been a real evolution in this field from, back when I started in corporate social responsibility. It wasn't even called that. It was called corporate philanthropy, and it was about grant making. It was strictly about making grants to organizations in communities. And that was terrific, and we still do it. And cash is really important to communities, but somewhere along the line, really in the 1990s, that the focus really shifted to what how corporations are acting, what they're doing to support their colleagues, their employees, what their workplace practices are, what their benefits are, whether they're really committed to diversity and inclusion or not, how they treat their customers, are their products and services, high quality, is their service high quality, are they well priced, are they environmentally, safe and friendly, how they treat the environment, what your carbon footprint is, what your waste, how much waste you're creating. So all of these kinds of things became, much more important than just what you give to organizations. And that's how corporate social responsibility kind of developed. And now there's sort of a new realm called ESG, or environmental, social, and governance practices. And it really looks at, okay, it's great that you're doing environmental things, and it's great that you're doing social things like grant making and volunteering and paying attention to your colleagues and diversity and inclusion. But governance is also important. So how are you governed as a company? What does your board of directors look like? What kinds of practices are they engaged in? Are you transparent? Do you disclose information to the public? Are you, ethical in your practices? I mean, all those things have become really critically important too. So and now there's a lot of different ways of measuring ESG work. There are a lot of rating and ranking organizations out there, and reporting frameworks. And so, I was just on a call before this one, with our investor relations group. They're the ones that, really maintain relationships with our shareholders, and all the questions that we get from investors about our CSR and ESG activities, which we never got, 5 years ago. So now, there are a multitude of investors who are concerned about these social issues. And of course, our customers have always been, interested and concerned, and certainly our employees are as well. And so, we got we've got regulators. We're a heavily regulated business. We've got regulators who are asking questions all the time. And so, if you're a publicly traded, prominent, company, you've got a lot of pressure from a lot of stakeholders to be good citizens and to make sure that on a variety of fronts, whether it's your products and services, your workplace practices, or your environmental practices, we're being asked and challenged and prodded, on a variety of fronts. And I think rightly so. I mean, companies exist with, licenses to operate from the public, and that's who we should be, answerable to and accountable to. So, if you want to be successful and thrive, you got to step up to that. And we're stepping up our game there. I think we've, as a company, have always had the right values and have taken the right kinds of actions, but in our 170-year history, but stepping it up, we got to do better. And we're going to do better. And that starts with the board of directors and the CEO and our senior leaders, all the way, down throughout the organization.
Thank you, team. Thank you so much. We have more questions coming in, and staff, please help me if we are okay to move on. Or I know we had to finish at 1:45, but if we are all okay, should we continue with maybe one more question? Team, are you okay? What is your?
I'm okay.
Great. So I will read Yasin's question. He's interested to know your opinion, whether or not the impact investing is going to be the next CSR or the evolution of CSR, taking into consideration the ongoing challenges and actual re-engineering of capitalism.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I mean, I definitely think that social investing has become really, a prominent concern at companies. Like I was saying before, we have a lot more investors and shareholders that are interested in, ESG issues and how we operate socially. So I think the concept of social investment has really pushed the envelope inside companies. Impact investing, which is a fairly technical thing in the way in how you use your resources from a bonding or loan or investment standpoint as a company. That will work, and for some companies, it's not going to work so well for other companies. We're not an investment company, for instance. We don't make investments. Right. So, I mean, we process payments, that's what we do. And so we don't really make investments in things. We don't have, we maintain a lot of cash because we need that cash in order to pay the merchants that, people have made purchases from. So, it's not going to really work so well for a company like ours. But I think that the idea of impact investing has gained a lot of traction particularly with companies that are investment firms, and they can see how they can use those investments in a way to support the communities. The one exception to that is with our CRA activity. So banks and financial services companies in the United States are governed by something called the Community Reinvestment Act. And the Community Reinvestment Act requires you to make investments in communities, particularly for things like low-income housing. And we do have a bank that's headquartered in Utah, in Salt Lake City, Utah, where we have a major facility. And we do, make CRA investments in Utah and the Western region of the United States. And so to some extent, we do engage in impact investing in that way, but it's limited to that particular geographic area, and it's limited to very, very specific things that are eligible under the CRA legislation. So that's an exception to that. But, I think to the extent that companies can use the resources that they have to invest wisely and impactfully in communities, we'll all benefit from that.
That's great, team. And I know that we have, I think I'm missing one question. And if I may jump in and read that question too. I know we are using some of the break time, but I think fellows will appreciate your insight on Radhika's question.
Really quickly, Shushanna, I just want to interrupt to let folks know that people who really do